Hi, everyone. It's Rachel here. Thank you so much for joining me tonight and my very special guest, sexual empowerment coach Amy Jo Goddard, as we talk about her trademark 9 elements of sexual empowerment. I'm really looking forward to this conversation tonight. And to start us off, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself and how Amy Jo and I met. And then we're going to jump right into it, where she's going to tell us about her work and the basic principles behind what it means to be sexually empowered. So if you don't know me, I am a sexual abuse recovery coach, and I work with survivors of childhood sexual abuse who are sick and tired of feeling broken and unfixable and are really ready to let go of the pain of abuse and finally move on with their lives. And I can be found at rachelgrantcoaching.com. So feel free to pop over and check me out later after our call tonight. And I'm certainly happy to be here as a resource for you in any way that I can. And I actually heard about Amy Jo through a colleague, and when I visited her website and read up on her a little bit, I was like, hey, this is a girl I got to know because she has it going on, and I really loved the message that she was spreading. And so Amy and I had a chat and got to know each other a little bit, and thankfully she agreed to come on with me tonight and talk with you all, because what she has to say about sex, sexuality, empowerment, how trauma is mixed up in all of that and impacted by that is really, really super important and really on point. So I know you guys are going to learn so much from her, because what I know about her is that she really thrives on helping people create the delicious sex and relationships they desire. And, you know, we've got an expert in the house, folks, because she not only has a master's degree in human sexuality education from New York University, she also has 20 years of experience in the sexuality field, and she works virtually with private clients in her sexual empowerment method, and even facilitates a 9-month Women's Sexually Empowered Life program, where women have opportunities to really deeply explore and heal and grow and celebrate their sexuality. And one thing I'm really excited about this year for Amy is that she's launching her flagship virtual coaching program, Woman on Fire. And it's really going to be for women wanting a dive deep opportunity to explore their sexual selves from anywhere in the world. So that's an amazing, amazing thing that she's launching. And in addition to that, Amy Jo travels all over and teaches classes and really helps people connect the dots around sexuality and money, which, that's a whole other topic, right, guys? And then, expanding creativity, growing their confidence, and really cool, she has a book that's going to be coming out in the fall of 2015. And so we've got so much to learn from her tonight, and you can certainly find her online and connect with her at amyjogoddard.com. And don't worry, I'll be sending that web address out to you guys later tonight if you don't have some place to jot that down. So, Amy Jo, welcome so much. Thank you for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah. Where I'd like to get started tonight is just hearing a little bit more about, how long you've been doing what you do, how you decided to be a sexual empowerment coach. How did you find your way to the amazing, amazing work that you do?
Well, it really came out of my own experience. I get this question all the time. People are always very curious, how does one choose such a career? And it is unusual and unconventional, and was even more so over 20 years ago, when I decided to go into this field. But it really came out of a couple of things. One was growing up not having a lot of information about sex, really not having any information about sex. No adult ever talked to me about sex. I never had any conversation. I never had any formal sex education. And went through a lot of difficult experiences, sexual assault, unplanned pregnancies, trying to figure out my body and how to have orgasms once I was having, consensual sex, and really trying to figure all of that out and just not having any resources at all because, of course, that was pre-internet as well. So, and then the other piece was that, I went to college and became a feminist activist, and I did a lot of work around sexual assault issues and reproductive health and justice, and basically things that were such a big part of women's sexuality, and ultimately figured out that I really wanted to do work that would empower women and girls, and I didn't know exactly what that looked like, and then I really kind of put it together that I wanted to help them through that doorway of sexuality, because I knew after going through my own empowerment process around sexuality in my body and everything that entailed, how profound that was, and I really wanted to work with women on that. So
nice. That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. And certainly, oftentimes our best works that we bring into our life, into the lives of others, is really informed by the experiences that we've had. And I think it's always really encouraging to be able to connect with somebody who's been there, right, who's been in the struggle around in the same area where we're feeling struggle and disappointment and not at ease, et cetera. And one thing that I found myself being curious about as you were sharing that was if you ever work with men. I know we have a couple of guys on the line tonight, and, do you also feel like the work that you do speaks to men? Have you ever had that opportunity?
Yeah, I have worked with men a little bit. I worked with them a little bit more in my early days of coaching when I would do sort of like one-off sessions. But what I found is that there wasn't the same kind of staying power in terms of the work with men.
Interesting.
And that may just be my approach, maybe in other approaches something else works, but I do teach classes that are for all genders, and often I get men who come and take those classes. A lot of the great men who have come through my business have come in couples where they're working with their partners in their sexual lives. The majority of the time, the woman is the one that comes and then brings a male partner in, but I have had male partners be that initiator and really want to do some work. So the ones who have come through are always delightful because, I think anyone who's working on their sexuality and wants to really work on being conscious in it and shifting the things that aren't working. I always think that that's just incredible when people want to do that work because that's unusual. Most people won't take their sexuality that seriously. And I think for men it's just, it's like the old joke, like it's hard for them to ask for directions, so much less to ask
what are you going to do
around sex when men are really in the culture the ones that are expected to just know what to do, to initiate sex, to know how to get their partners off, to, they know their own body. That's just sort of, I think, oftentimes the approach. So I think there's a lot of cultural things that kind of get in the way of men sometimes reaching out for the help that they want. But when they do, they're awesome guys. So, and believe me, the women that I work with are like, where are those guys? So, they want to meet them too. So, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So, for all of you guys here with us tonight, welcome and super happy to have you here. And, you are amongst the rare in a lot of ways because there are a lot of things working against men to be able to step forward and say, this is an area of my life that's just not working the way I want it to, and to seek out support and be in a conversation about that is really cool. So I acknowledge you guys. And for the ladies here, just because maybe we are more likely to step out doesn't mean that it's still easy or that it's easy, right? And I'm sure you've seen that, Amy, Joe, and like, gosh, when women are coming and they're hurting and they're not really getting what they want. Tell me a little bit more about the kind of women that you work with. Who do you find really resonates with your work and gets the most out of it?
Yeah, I really think that everyone needs help with their sexuality at some point. I think as you were talking, I just wanted to say that it's like we all need that help. None of us automatically know how to have great sex, communicate about it, understand our bodies, understand how to maximize our own pleasure, deal with our own issues around desire. None of that. We don't come into the world understanding how to do any of that. So I just think understanding that all of us have to learn that somewhere is helpful for people. And so generally the women who come to me they're women who, certainly care about self-development and self-growth. They've done some work on themselves. They've been to therapy, or they've done yoga, or they've worked with other kinds of healers or coaches. And a lot of times what I hear is, I've done all this other work on myself and I'm ready to do this part. And it's sort of like this thing that's often like tugging at them, like, if I could just break through this, So they tend to be really self-actualized in many ways.
Right.
The women I work with are rocking it in other parts of their lives, and this is the part that they're just stuck around or just need more support around. They tend to be really creative women. They've had some success in either like family endeavors or career or creative endeavors, and they really want to take their lives to the next level. And
I love that.
That guides them to me in some way, and so they're pretty delightful to work with.
That's really cool. One of the things that I've certainly experienced in my time, working with survivors of abuse is that it's that really does happen a lot of the times, that my clients come in with lots of things not working for them when it comes to intimacy and sexuality. And I think that a lot of the work that we get to do together lays some foundations and kind of opens the door. But this is exactly why I love having, being in partnership with people just like you, because there are so many layers to this, and then once they get to that point where it's exactly like that, okay, I've cleared all that out of my way. Now this is the area of my life where I want to experience some change and transformation. And one of the things that you really promote and talk about is sexual empowerment. And, I bet all of us here have a different idea about what that looks like. So I'd really love for you to share with us your definition. Like, what does that really mean for you? Well,
I'm working on a book. It's in production right now, and that'll be out in September, about my model of sexual empowerment. The book's called Women on Fire. And it's not just one thing. And it's funny because I get Google alerts for a lot of things, and I get a Google alert for sexual empowerment when it shows up in the media, and almost always the articles are almost always related to something about abuse or overcoming something around sexual assault. So So I think that people do really associate like the need for empowerment with those kinds of experiences, and yet I think it's something everybody needs. So I find that really interesting. Sexual empowerment is about your relationship to your body and how much you love it and are really at home in it, regardless of its size, shape, color, age, all of those things that can bring up a lot of feelings for us about our bodies. That's a huge piece of it. It's understanding how pleasure works for us, how to have orgasms, how to really like navigate all of the things that make sex better. It's about knowing how, like having an understanding of what your desires are, and then being able to communicate those desires. And those are two really big pieces for a lot of people. And, you know, it's certainly there's a lot of pieces in terms of relationship, and then how we show up in relationship, how we advocate for ourselves, how we make our sexual decisions, and whether we really feel like we are the agent of our own sexuality. So sexual agency is something that I talk a lot about, and I talk about in my book, that all of us need to have that sense of sexual agency and come home to ourselves, so that we aren't leaving ourselves in relationships. And I think that's something that a lot of people do because we don't know how to deal with the power of sexuality. We don't have the skills to communicate, and we don't really understand sometimes everything that's going on.
Okay. You know, what really strikes me about that is this is not about sex. Like the ins and outs, excuse the pun. But it's like, you know, it's about communication. It's about self-acceptance, body awareness, being present, tuning in, making choices, setting boundaries. Holy cow. Like, you know, there's a lot going on here for us to really be able to say we are, you know, I love this idea of sexual agency, you know, that we have this ownership of our experience and what's happening, you know, to us. Yeah. And certainly, you know, what we know, though, is that sexual trauma, abuse, rape, assault, all of these things do quite the number on all of those pieces and all of those elements.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that is why, you know, I get so many of these stories coming across Google, because that's kind of the context in which people maybe talk about the idea of sexual empowerment. It is about sex, but it's about lots of other things too. And and yeah, you know, I always tell people, you know, sex and sexuality are very different. Sexuality is much bigger. You know, sex is a part of our sexuality, but our sexuality is it's our sexual energy. It's how we show up in the world, how we express ourselves, how we create intimacy and connection, pleasure. It's all of those things, desire.
Right. So. Right. Yeah, and when, you know, when you've experienced sexual trauma and there's this disconnection from self in a lot of ways, right? So, you know, what would you say about that struggle? Like, what are some of the things that folks who've been sexually abused or traumatized, what are some of those setbacks or some of those challenges that they're dealing with that you really see are kind of key that they need to address that, you know, maybe other people do as well, but, you know, like for this population of people, it's always pretty key that they look at these areas.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times there's a lot of issues around experiencing pleasure and being able to really receive. And I think that people have that in general. I think a lot of women have trouble receiving just because, you know, we're socialized to take care of everybody else and not take care of ourselves. Yeah. And give to everybody else and not really to receive. So there's a lot of issues there in general. And then I think when someone's been through a sexual assault, there can be a lot of shutdown that can happen emotionally, physically, that makes it hard to really receive sexually and have the pleasure that someone might want. So that's one piece. You know, and I think there's a piece around control. And what I see a lot in the clients and the women who I work with and who come through my programs is they struggle with the piece around control and letting go of control, which, of course, you have to do to some degree in order to really experience pleasure and a deeper, intimate connection. And if you're focused on controlling that and you're kind of micromanaging it in a sense, there's going to be limitations there. You're only going to get so close to other people because they can't get closer to you. And you're only going to experience so much pleasure if you're, like, kind of tight in that controlled way. So I think there's a lot of pieces there, and it's totally understandable that someone would have a hard time letting go of control when someone else has taken control over their bodies, and they felt very out of control. And I think that's where that always comes from. Anytime someone has a controlling personality, whether, and generally if it's showing up sexually, it's going to show up in other ways. And if it's showing up in other ways, it probably will show up in some ways sexually. When someone has that always tells me that they've been through a situation where they really felt out of control, whether that was a sexual assault or sexual abuse of some kind, or whether they just grew up in a household where things were really out of control and they didn't really feel safe, or there wasn't any consistency, or the parenting was really lacking, or whatever was going on there. Maybe there were alcoholics in the house, or just there's some situation where there was a sense of a lack of that. So that comes from a lot of places, but that's a big one. And then there's real physical things that people have. I've worked with a lot of clients who've had real physical pain. And I think that psychosomatic nature of the things that go on in our body is important to really look at. That when there is that psychological pain, that can show up in our bodies, when we're tense, when we're nervous about sex, when we fear it, or if we fear men, or if we fear whatever kinds of situations, that can easily show up in the body. And it can show up as painful sex. It can show up as just a tightening of the vagina, and just having a hard time even being able to have any kind of penetration or intercourse. So there's a lot of ways that can manifest, and that can take time to work through. And sometimes there are, medical doctors who can be helpful, and a lot of times they're really not helpful. And so it's being able to work on that healing from another perspective.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And, I really appreciate you highlighting the fact that there are a myriad, a list of things and types of experiences that we can have that can then impede us in our sexuality, that it doesn't have to just, it's not just sexual abuse or assault, that certainly these other situations that you identified can really impact us and have a lasting effect on basically how we see ourselves and how we handle and cope with situations. And that's, of course, going to carry over into all the areas of our lives, right? So I really appreciated you kind of bringing that to the table. One thing I found myself being curious about as you were sharing that, Amy Jo, was what were some of the things you tried? Because I know, and if it's not too personal, you mentioned that you had been sexually assaulted, and so, kind of in your journey of that, how did some of that show up for you, and what were some of the things that you tried in order to kind of move forward and to address that area of your life?
Yeah. Well, I think for me, the first experience for me was my first experience with sex, which, for many people was not consensual. And, I think I have a very adult lens and an ability to look at that from a really different perspective now. That has been really helpful. And I think some of it was just a maturity and just kind of understanding wow, how were we both kind of set up in that situation? It wasn't a violent kind of sexual assault, but it was definitely not it was not a choice that I got to make. It was not a conversation I got to have, and it was so much because I hadn't had any conversation with myself about sex, because I didn't even know. I didn't even know.
Right.
So for me, I think the most healing thing was my education, was my sexual education that I got later, and having mentors and understanding that it could look really different, and then getting to have really positive experiences with sex. And there was just an emotional process that I had to go through, and a grieving, and I think that everyone who goes through that experience has some kind of process with that. Another experience happened later with a family member that was a lot harder to talk about, because it meant disrupting other relationships. It meant it meant confronting things that people didn't want to see or look at. So, but ultimately I got to confront him, and that was really, really a turning point and really important for me to speak that and and initially have it denied, and then actually have him, finally kind of cop to what had happened, and that it wasn't okay. And so that was healing too, And so, for me, that's a lot of what the process was. And then it was like a lot of years of, therapy and just getting a lot of emotional support and just growing as an emotional person.
Yeah. Nice.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, and I thank you for sharing that, because what I really, want you guys to hear, who are listening, is that, wherever you are in your journey, seeking support for where you're at in your journey and making sure that it matches up with what you need in that moment, but that, we find our ways to the other side of stuff. Sometimes it's a windy road, and we do this piece and we do that piece, and it all kind of adds up together to get us to the place where we're really, on the other side and good. And I know from just, seeing you and experiencing you that you're so in that place. And one of the things that I know has resulted from all of this for you is kind of a real passion for, kind of helping people get past this struggle around sexuality and relationships, particularly when they're, successful in other areas of their lives. And, why do you think that is, though? Why is it that in a culture where, especially, American culture, where sex sells, we see sex everywhere, and yet there's so much struggle around it, and people aren't talking about it, and there's negativity. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think we get so many mixed messages about it. It's like we pretend like we're such an open culture, and we're really not. At the end of the day, we're a glossy, over-sexualized version of that.
Gotcha.
And I think that we have a lot of sort of like false images of sexual empowerment, and kind of like, what is sexual empowerment? It's like you see these beautiful models being really sexy, and then you learn about them and realize they're like totally anorexic and at war with their bodies, and there's all kinds of other things that can be going on there. So, yes, we see a lot of sexual images, but I think that we're not having a real conversation about sexuality on the whole. We're still debating whether we should talk about sexuality in schools with kids, or whether we should mention the word clitoris, because, that's a bad word. I mean, we're still having these debates, and it's really, to me, really outrageous what a disservice we do to young people, because I know had I had that sex education, that would have helped me, tremendously. That could have changed so many things for me, and I don't have any regrets. My path is what it was, and it needed to be that so that I could be led to do the work that I'm doing. But so many of us had such hard experiences that had we had some good education and been able to have real dialogues about sexuality, which young people want to have. They want to understand how to have relationships and be able to talk in a real way about sex. And if they get that opportunity, that's a huge game changer. And so I just think as a culture, we're failing young people. And then young people grow into adults who think they're supposed to know about sex just because they're an adult, but they still don't know anything about it. And a lot of times people assume that because I'm a sexuality educator that I must work with teenagers, because they think teenagers are the only people who need that. And I always say, actually, I work with former teenagers who never got any sex education.
Yes, right, yeah. Oh, wow, I love that. And it's so true, because, we're not given this, a lot of platforms to really have this conversation. And and even in, then there's the added layer of sometimes with, specifically in my area with survivors, there's all sorts of, backlash, like, why are you talking about sex? That's triggering. That's upsetting. I'm like, whoa, wait a minute here. Like, no, that's the whole problem, is that sex is triggering, and we want to get you past that, right? Mm-hmm. And I love this, just reiterating that, we have to learn these things. This is something I share with my clients. It's like communication skills, relationship skills, sexuality. These things are not taught but they should be. There, for whatever reason, we decided somehow these are things that we're just supposed to naturally figure out and know what to do. You're absolutely right about that. It's not the case. And so, I really want you guys to hear that. You're not dysfunctional. You're not ignorant. You're not, broken somehow because you don't know these things. You just haven't been taught them. And you have a real opportunity to learn now. Yeah. And so that really brings us to, the kind of the heart of the matter here tonight, because I know that you've created, this 9-step process to becoming sexually empowered. So I'd love you to share those with us.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I think that I always say sex is a skill, or sex is a collection of skills, or it's a skill set. Because it really is funny when you think about it that it's not funny, but, not funny, ha-ha, but funny. Funny, aren't we silly that we haven't figured that out yet? That we assume that we should just automatically know how to do something as complex as sex. Mm-hmm. We don't assume that you would know how to drive a car without instruction, without getting some coaching about it, without, learning from people who've driven a car before you and understand how they work. We wouldn't think that you would know how to play a great game of soccer or football, right? Super Bowl this weekend. You wouldn't know how to do that without learning, and then to get good at it, you would need to practice and be coached and all of those things. Right. You wouldn't know how to cook, an amazing gourmet meal without education about your way around a kitchen and about ingredients and how to manage the heat and timing and so many things, So I just think it's so interesting that something as complex as sex, we would think, oh, you should just know. No one should just know. So
I just got this great image of people having sex licenses. And you could be like out on a date and be like, "Do you have your sex license?" "No, you're still in like your pre-driving time." "Okay, well, call me back." And
what's your training?
You have a graduate degree,
which belt level are you? Are you a brown belt? Yellow belt? Ooh, you're a black belt. Okay.
All right. Yeah. Okay. We continue. Second date.
Yeah.
Awesome. So. Yeah, it was so good. Right on.
Yeah, the 9 elements of a sexually empowered life really came out of the work that I was doing. They came organically out of the work. It wasn't something that I just randomly picked. These were things that I could see that every client who came through my doors needed. The first element is voice. Excavate and rewrite your sexual story. A lot of times, so within voice, it's both story and then how we use our voice. So it's the stories we tell ourselves and others about our sexuality, and sometimes those stories need reframing. I was able to really reframe my story so that it, I don't feel victimized. I don't need to feel victimized about my story. Mm-hmm. And sometimes we're not there yet, and we need to tell our story and work through our story. But my goal with any client is to help her get out of a place of feeling victimized if that's where she's at. Because you can't be empowered and be a victim at the same time. So that feels really important, but people have to have their process with it. And sometimes it means just telling the story differently, or just stop telling the story because it's upsetting to you every time you tell it, and you don't need to keep telling it. So that's a big piece, really looking at your sexual story, your herstory, your history, and then also how you use your voice, how you really own your own sexual voice, how you advocate for yourself, some of that stuff we talked about earlier around boundaries and communication. Of course, all of that's part of that. So that's the first element. The second element is release, making space for the sexual self that you're waiting for. And so this is releasing, stories about your sexuality or ideas about your sexuality that, or who you think you need to be as a sexual person. I think there's a lot of things people have to release there. Sometimes that's related to gender. Sometimes it's just related to just, who we are in the world. Sometimes it comes from family and culture. But there's a lot of ideas about who we think we need to be. There's a lot of shame. I haven't met a person yet who doesn't have some sexual shame. I think we've all been shamed sexually in some way in our life.
Wow.
And that shame, we have to find a way to heal and release that so that it stops getting in the way. I mean, I think that harms people's sexuality more than just about anything. There can be a lot of guilt. Certainly there's issues around trauma. Trauma is a big piece of what we often have to release as well. So release is really about making space.
Right.
So I think that some of that clearing out is kind of really what has to happen for then us to have the ability to bring in what we really want.
Gotcha. So in a lot of ways, it's first of all reconnecting with the fact that you have some say in what's going on here. And then having reconnected with that voice, being able to then clear the space of all of the old messages, all of the old junk, the shame, the guilt, all of that, in order to then be able to really step into the next piece. Did I get that right?
Absolutely, yeah.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, element 3 is emotion. I think that a lot of people are run by their emotions. Their emotions drive them, and they do not have skill around emotion. So the emotion piece is really learning how to show up as emotionally powerful, how to be the guide of your emotions and to learn from them and listen to them, but not be controlled by them.
Right.
And to get out of reactionary and defensive patterns, because those patterns really get in people's way. So every client I work with, we work on that. What are the ways they're reacting? What are the ways they're being defensive that are really preventing them from having the closeness and the intimacy that they want, that are preventing them from getting their needs met? There's just a lot of emotional patterns. We all have them. We've all learned them. We've all learned to be defensive in some way in our lives. Some people a lot more than others. And so it's about learning to see what those defense mechanisms are and, and to have what, like, the Dalai Lama would call, like, a skillful mind, right? A lot of times we allow the emotional state to spiral, we spiral in terms of, like, our thoughts and where we go.
Right. Oh, yeah.
In our heads. And we have to break those patterns and have a more skillful mind so that we're the ones in control. Right.
What I really love about that is, on one hand, one might think, I better be, like, really emotional in order to be, like, really sexual and tuned in and have a great experience. I better be able to feel every feeling and be really expressive. And what I hear you saying is that, yes, it's about being tuned in with your emotions, but it's also about being in charge of that, not it just being kind of this willy-nilly thing and being run and controlled and pushed around by, but rather being able to identify destructive emotions that are causing you to stay in these repetitive patterns that are affecting you in your sexuality. Yeah. Got it. Awesome.
Yeah, I think, sometimes we front load emotion or the importance of emotion too much. And I think it's coming into balance with that. And just also understanding that emotions change. Feelings change. Emotions change.
Yeah, very much so.
And sometimes it feels like, we're never going to feel another way again, so if we're going through a depression or a deep sadness or something, but you will. They always change.
Awesome. So true. Yeah. So true. Okay, great. So what's the fourth step? Once we have a little more handle on our emotional life and that, what comes next?
The fourth element is body. It is radically accepting your body, which we mentioned earlier, and that's big work for a lot of people.
Big work. Yeah.
To really love the body that you have, to see it as a temple, to see it as an absolute gift that you get to experience this world through a physical body, and to enjoy it and learn about it and experience it and explore it and understand it, and to stop being at war with it. Which, I think so many people are just at war with their bodies. They beat up on their bodies. They direct all kinds of negativity. And sometimes there's, again, you have ebbs and flows with that because, you grow older and things change, and then there's maybe more feelings that come up about the body, and, it's also like accepting aging and the changes that happen. So it's really radically accepting your body whatever state it's in today.
Mhm. Yeah, and this is I definitely think this is a big one for folks, and it's dealing with the counter images that we've talked about, and then even without those images out there, I have this sense that we could just as easily come into this place of being hard on ourselves and self-judgment and all of those sorts of things. So what I'd love is there any one thing that you've seen, just a tidbit here. I know it's a layered thing, but if you were to say one thing to the ladies here tonight, and men too, because their body image is all wrapped up as well, but that you think would be of a help to them or a place to start when it comes to that, what would you say there?
It's different for different people depending what the issues are, but I think it's really working towards an acceptance. Like you can spend your whole life not accepting your body and just being upset that this is what your body is, that it's not what you want it to be, that your thighs aren't different or whatever, and I think there's a deep need for acceptance of like, okay, this is my body today, and to not be living for the body that you want to have when you lose 50 pounds or when you can fit into those jeans again, or I think there's a way in which it's another way we leave ourselves. We're constantly leaving and going into, it's like we're in the future or we're in the past. Oh, the body I used to have, or the body I'm going to have when I do X, Y, or Z, and it just prevents you from having the experience of right now. And all it does is make you feel bad. That energy doesn't do anything for you, but make you feel bad.
Gotcha.
So, I think there's a real piece around that, it's not just a simple step. I can't really give you like a
for sure
a simple step. But it is, I think, really engaging deeply with the idea of like, what would it mean to just really accept my body as it is right now, and if it changes in the future, great. If I do lose the 50 pounds or if I do get to fit into those jeans, great. But what would it mean to really love it right now? And I often teach people to create practices around their sexuality, and if they have issues with their body in particular, then I always encourage them to create a practice that's very physical and that engages the body.
Gotcha. Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so what's the next step once we are radically accepting our lumps and our curves and our beauties and all of those pieces? What comes next?
The next one is desire. So it's really activating desire and creating a sexual practice. As I mentioned a moment ago, I encourage people to create sexual practices. I think a lot of desire seems to work differently for men and women. Men will experience arousal and then they'll feel desire. They'll have like a physical arousal in their body and then that desire follows, and they're like ready to go. Mm-hmm. Sexually, in general, obviously I'm speaking generally, but often that's how it works for men. For women, that arousal takes some time, and usually the desire comes first. It's like there's the desire, like the emotional want for something, for someone, for sex, for whatever, and then the arousal follows, or they do something about the desire and that creates the arousal. Mm-hmm. Women don't tend to have a lot of spontaneous desire, not Gotcha. In the way that men do. And so for some women, and particularly as we grow older and desire changes, hormones change, a lot of things shift, women will wait to feel desire, and you're going to be waiting a really long time. So it's really about like activating
Any day now.
Yeah, well, maybe I'll feel desire for my husband next week,
Oh, gotcha.
And so then I think people end up just feeling really bad, or like something's really wrong with them. And there's nothing wrong with you. It's just that I think a lot of times our desire actually needs a kickstart. It needs to be activated. You've got to engage the crush or read the erotic story or, masturbate even if you're not feeling a ton of desire for it. There's things we can do that can really kind of give it that kickstart. And what I encourage people to do is to create a sexual practice. Create a practice. A lot of people are familiar with the idea of having a spiritual practice. Right? Like they do yoga or some kind of prayer or meditation every day. And so I encourage people to create sexual practices that they do daily that really brings their sexuality to the forefront, brings it to the front burner, so it's not like getting pushed to the side. And I think when we do that develops our desire as well.
Right. Well, I love that. And, one thing I get curious about when you talk about a sexual practice is I think there's the obvious things, like masturbation and touch and these sorts of things. But what else goes into that? Could it be like just journaling about sex? Could it be fantasizing? What could people what's on the plate here? What's on the menu?
Absolutely. Yeah, it could be all of those things. All of the women who I work with as private clients and in my programs, I have all of them develop a practice. And it can change, too. It's not like it has to be the same, it might change over time. But, sometimes it might be like having a naked dance practice. Like, I'm going to dance naked, or if you want to up the ante, I'm going to dance naked in front of the mirror 10 minutes a day, So sometimes like a physical practice where you're just enjoying your body and being in your body can be a really great thing to do. I have a self-touch practice that I really love where I just, people could do it with me right now. You could just start with your hands at your crown and just slowly, intentionally run your hands down the back of your head, back of your neck, to your shoulders, to your arms, down your arms. Run your hands down your face, down the whole front of your body. And back up the back and just kind of reach around and reach as much of your back as you can. And you could do it naked also. It's nice to do naked. But it's just really greeting your body. And I do that as part of my meditation practice in the mornings, and it takes like 2 minutes. One of my clients named it the 2-minute tingle, because if you just really do it, like your skin starts to tingle, like you get your blood flowing. It feels nice.
I love that.
And it's just like that intentional touch. Sometimes we're not getting enough touch, and we can give ourselves some of it. Of course, it's nice to get touch from other people, but we can do that for ourselves. And it might even be things like when you're putting on lotion after your shower, like doing it intentionally, not just slapping it on and like hurrying up. Like actually taking time to like enjoy, like, oh, I like the softness of my thighs, like, oh, I can feel my muscles and my fat and my roundness, and that feels nice, and just like actually enjoying things like that.
That's really good, and I'll tell you, like, what I super love about what you just shared is that all of these practices are sexual and really expand our definition and our view of what counts as sexual and sexuality and sensual and play, because a lot of times we get so focused on orgasm, intercourse, these things, and just simple light touch. And so good, Amy Jo. Love it. Boy, we could spend a long time there, but we got to keep going. Because I know we got more to look at. So what's the next one?
The next thing is permission. And it's really giving yourself permission to develop your erotic authenticity. Like, what's really real for you? If you stopped believing you had to be whatever they're telling you need to be, whatever you've believed you need to be sexually, like, or want the things that you want, or express your sexuality in the way that you want to express it, what would you actually be, and how would you actually express? So it's really finding that erotic authenticity and just giving yourself permission to desire the things that you desire, and to not want the things that you don't want. I was talking to a client of mine the other day. She offered her story for my forthcoming book. So I've got some women's stories in the book, and she's in her early 50s, and she's dating a guy in his early 20s. And she was just judging herself up and down, and just, she went through a divorce. Sure. She's just been having the best sex of her life. She's having a great time. And she was feeling really bad about, having this younger lover. And but they're having a great time. And it's like she just had to give herself permission to want that, and to acknowledge that she's attracted to younger guys, and that's fun for her, and that's okay, Sometimes it might be just giving yourself permission to like things that are outside of the norm, It might be giving yourself permission to not want sex as much as you're told you should want it, or to want it more, than most people seem to want it. I mean, it's like we have so many judgments on ourselves about things that we want and don't want. So I think that aspect of permission is really important. And that's a lot of what I do in my work. I give people a lot of permission, and then ultimately the idea is that they'll give it to themselves.
Right, yeah. But certainly when we hear that acceptance and the non-judgment from somebody else, it helps to kind of normalize it and take it out of this, oh, that's weird and strange. And my guess is, you do a lot of your groups and things like that, I bet, a lot of times the experience is, wait, oh, you like that too? Oh, you do that too? Oh, that's you? And you stop, you get out of that nonsense of this is just you and it's your thing and you're the only one with that problem or with that way of thinking about things or that desire. Yeah, I love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, a lot of stuff around fantasy too. It's like you get to fantasize about whatever you want to fantasize about. And I think a lot of times when people are survivors, if they have fantasies that where, some form of non-consent or even rape is part of the fantasy, there can be a lot of guilt around that. And it's like, fantasy and reality are different.
That's right.
That could be really hot in a fantasy. That doesn't mean that's something that you want to have happen to you.
Exactly.
So I think there's just so many judgments sometimes about whatever it is we're fantasizing about. That or something else.
Gotcha. So after a real practice of self-acceptance and allowing ourselves to love what we love, like what we like, and do what we do, what comes next?
The next one is play. It's just we take sex way too seriously, and we have to remember how to play and also develop sexual skills. This is where skill comes in. And sometimes as we play, we discover like, I like that. I want to learn. I want to do that again. I want to do that again. And then the next thing we know, we're actually learning how to do something really well, and we're developing a skill. So skills are really intricately connected to play.
Nice.
And then the more skills we have, the more we can play with them and take them to another level. So, but I just think we just need to play more and laugh more and be silly more with sex and not have it be so serious. Create playful scenarios that are fun, that keep it fresh and not rote. So play is super important.
I love it. Awesome.
The next element is home. I kind of mentioned this one earlier. It's really, it brings kind of all of these together in the sense of like you're coming home to yourself. And as you come home, you're building more sexual confidence. I think that being at home in the self really helps a person to come from a place of self-assuredness and confidence, which is what most people tell me they want. So when you are coming from a place of home, you're not going outside of yourself to please other people, to get that validation and that attention and that whatever. You're really honoring yourself. And you're perfectly fine saying, nope, I don't want to do that, or, yeah, that sounds awesome, or, hey, I have an idea, let's try this, and then not being completely thrown off balance if someone doesn't want to do what your idea is, and taking it as a huge rejection. I think that's another piece of the coming home process.
Yeah, gotcha. Excuse me, sorry. Yeah, I love that because it's all about, it's like a foundation is what I hear you saying, like is what I think of at home. It's like your safe space and it's your coziness and you've got your favorite blanket and your favorite chair and it's like everything works to bring you that comfort and that pleasure that you want. And having that foundation and from that place then being able to explore, being able to handle, somebody not liking what you're doing or making suggestions or giving you feedback. Yeah. Got that. Cool.
Yeah. And then we do such a mind trip on ourselves sometimes with that. And if we're acting out codependent patterns also, we're not at home. You're not at home in yourself if you're enacting those kinds of patterns, and those have to be worked on.
Gotcha. All right, and then that brings us to the final step, which is
fire.
Yeah.
This is why the book is called Women on Fire. It's fire. It's that inner fire, that inner sexual energy, and that energy is really what drives everything that we do in our lives. It drives our creativity. It drives our projects, our businesses, our work. It is the energy we use for lovemaking and for child making and for art making and music making and all of the things that we're here to create in the world. And so it's really about like that, and that to me is the core of our sexuality, that inner fire, that inner energy, that core sexual energy. That's the core of everything. That's what we use for, to really fuel our lives. And it comes, it comes from the same well as our creative energy, and our spiritual energy. And we talk about these things sometimes like they're disparate parts, or even like they're antithetical in some way. The proverbial a lot of times like religion kind of does this separation thing, but it all comes from the same well, whatever you want to call it. But to me, that's the core. It's that life force, that core inside of us, that fire that fuels everything.
Well, and I love that, and I've heard this, and love that you're reiterating it, that, at the end of the day, this sexuality, this energy, right? I mean, you're calling it empowerment, and it's a power, it's a life force, it's all of these things. And when we have that working for us, I think that certainly you're right about it, that it ends up impacting how we show up in the world, how creative we are, what kinds of things we take on and don't take on, that it is this really beautifully all integrated, all interconnected thing. Yeah, I love that. So, thank you for sharing that with us. Really beautiful, just a really beautiful guide and structure. And I found myself asking a question as you were going through those, like, oh my gosh, like what if voice just seems super, super hard for me, but I feel like I could maybe, do some work around, body. Is this a sequential, do you think of this as you got to do this before this to this and this?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, that's why I call them elements rather than steps, because steps kind of makes it sound like they are linear, and it's not. I mean, sexuality is circular, it's circuitous, it's it's a journey. We revisit parts of it over and over. There are parts of it we never want to see again. And so it's very much that kind of a journey.
Okay. Good to know.
Even in my book, I outline these elements in depth in my book and give a lot of exercises and things like that for them. And even in the book, I say you don't have to read it in order. Read it in whatever order makes sense for you. I put them in the order that I think makes sense, and I wanted to end the book with fire, but I could have started with fire.
Okay, got that. Awesome. Well, this is super, super helpful and really insightful, and I want to give folks who are on the line an opportunity to chat with you and ask a few questions.
Sure.
But before we get to that, what I want everyone to know who's on the line is how they can get in touch with you. And so, folks, first of all, I want you to know that Amy Jo is giving us all one of her special gifts, which is a little book that you can download from her website, amyjogoddard.com. It's called Sexual Evolution, The 5 Stages of Sexual Need. So I really encourage you to head over to her website and download that, so that you can keep building on, what you've learned tonight. And also, make sure you get on her mailing list, because you're going to want to know when she has classes coming up, when she has her book out. And there's also tons of great resources on her site. So head over there, check her out. Please feel free to email her if you have any questions. You can certainly always email me too, and I can connect the two of you. Or if I can answer your question, I'll try. But yeah, anything else you want to say about that, Amy Jo, before we get to the Q&A?
Yeah, it's an audio class.
It's an audio class.
Yeah, so it's an audio class based on kind of Maslow's hierarchy of needs and how our sexual needs. Sometimes, and especially when we're in relationships, sometimes like one person is approaching sex from one place and the other is approaching it from a totally different place, because it's meeting a different need. So,
gotcha.
So the class is kind of about that. So yeah, it's an audio. You can grab that on my homepage at amyjogoddard.com, and yeah, if you have questions, you can write to info@amyjogoddard.com.
Okay. Gotcha. All right, folks. So we're really lucky to have Amy Jo on the line for about another half hour or so here to answer your questions. So please don't sit on your laurels. Get in here. Get your questions coming. So how you're going to do that is by pressing *6 on your phone, and then you'll be prompted to press 1 to come into the Q&A queue. And I will be calling on you by the last 4 digits of your phone number. And if you would like to be addressed by name, then you can just say, "Hi, this is," and we'll do that. If not, you can remain anonymous. And again, you press *6 and then the 1. And also, if you would like to text your questions, you can do so to 650-283-5215. Again, that's 650-283-5215. 888-866-5215. And to speak with us live, you're going to press *6 and then the number 1. So definitely take advantage of this opportunity to connect with Amy Jo and have some of your questions answered. And or if there was just something that you really got, like an aha moment or something got really clear for you, we certainly love to hear that. And, what made a difference for you, what resonated with you, what was helpful. Certainly happy to chat about that as well, because it always helps to kind of reiterate that for yourself and really be clear with what you're taking away. And so while people are getting up the courage and the gumption to chat with us, Amy Jo, one of the things that comes to mind for me is that there's a lot of fear here, I expect. That, oh my gosh, what if I do start taking some of these things on? What's going to happen to me? Or, just fear in general. And, as people start to, look at their sexuality and take on this area of their life. So, what advice do you have for folks who are like, oh, I just feel overwhelmed and freaked out by the whole thing, and that it's, it's just too much right now for me to even think about? What advice would you have for them?
I think you just have to start somewhere. And just the fact that you're on this call tonight is awesome. So, and I know that it takes a lot of courage to do things like this. And that's not lost on me. I really honor that. But yeah, I think it's okay to take baby steps. And just being in a place of, I'm just acknowledging that this is a thing. Maybe I'm not ready to take any kind of big action on it right now, but I'm going to start to be in conversation with my sexuality in a different way. Or just to acknowledge that there's some desires there, or that there's some healing that needs to happen, or whatever it is, to start having maybe a different kind of conversation with it that's not about judging it or feeling bad about it, but that that actually honors it and becomes curious about it. Just like I would direct someone in or coach someone in a relationship to approach your partner from a place of curiosity. If your sexuality were your partner, which indeed it is, how might you approach it with that sense of curiosity and wonder, rather than from a sense of wanting to control it or judge it or make it bad?
Yeah, nice. Thank you for that. Really good words of wisdom there, folks. In all things, start small. Take your time. We don't need to overhaul the whole system today. So let's take our first question. You ready?
Sure.
Okay. Hi there, 8337. How are you?
Hey, hello. This is Sally from Scottsdale. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, Sally. I've been hearing that. Oh, my goodness.
Well, first off, I just want to say, Amy, thank you so much for such wonderful information.
I think she dropped her phone.
Oh, I have to say, I love your laugh, Rachel. It's infectious, and it always is great to hear.
Thanks, Sally. Okay, and then I think, Amy, are you back with us?
I am. Drop the phone again. There I went.
No worries.
It's okay to make a mistake.
Yeah.
I snagged the cord. I keep snagging my cord.
Oh,
It's too late in the day for me to sit at my desk. I
don't even know what that is. A phone with a cord? What is this? Where are you? What's going on here?
Well, my headset cord.
Oh, gotcha. Right ahead. All right, Miss Sally, go ahead. What's your question? What did you want to share?
Well, one thing I want to just offer up first, if I may. My spiritual teacher is John Maxwell Taylor, and he taught me this great concept about, our own sexuality, and he expressed how his sentiments that the word or term masturbation is a Victorian term, which is not, the most open sexual period of our history. So instead, he uses self-cultivation, and I love that. I think it puts a whole real spin on what it really is about, and not some archaic term that has a lot of taboo already attached to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, my mentor, Betty Dodson, of course, wrote the book, The Joy of Self-Loving, which I think is great, too. It's just simple and to the point, But, yeah, I like that, self-cultivation. Yeah, I did my master's thesis
because we're self-cultivating when we are pleasuring ourselves, we're cultivating ourselves. So I find that word so much more empowering and opening, and rather than, the word masturbation, which, I don't know about you, but when I got caught, I was punished. So,
Yep.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is how words do kind of add or release, and so some people have a connection to the word masturbate that has, a lot of power in it, and then some people it feels limiting, and there's all sorts of these shaming connotations with it. And it is really beautiful to just notice how as we change the language sometimes about something, it changes our experience of it, or even our ability to approach it and think about doing it. Because you're right, if you were a kid and you were shamed for masturbating, well, okay, it might be really hard to masturbate. But if you've never been shamed for self-cultivating, hey, have a good night. It's like all of a sudden, hey, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that, Sally. Thank you for sharing that. Really cool. Awesome. Thank you so much. Cool. So good to hear your voice, Sally, and we'll be talking again soon. It's really, it kind of speaks to what we were talking about a little bit there about our culture, right, around sexuality and how certain things are, quote unquote, appropriate and okay, and other things are on the edge or dysfunctional or immoral, et cetera, et cetera. And so definitely part of this journey of reclaiming our sexuality, becoming empowered, is a lot about, letting go. I think that's the piece you were talking about, permission, right? Like, hey, this is what I like, and that's that, and I don't have to justify it or explain it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. All right, guys, so we're here for you, so press *6 to chat with us, or text 650-283-5215. And, while we're waiting to see if anyone else wants to come on the line with us, Amy Jo, I'd love to hear a little bit more about your book, because I think this is a really big deal and really cool that we're getting something kind of fresh out there. And it sounds like it's kind of the 9 elements, but expanded and broadened, or and maybe there's other stuff going on there. So can you tell us just a little bit more about what you're up to with that?
Yeah, the book's coming out in September. Penguin Random House is my publisher. They've been really supportive of this book. Not everyone got the book. So to their credit, they really, really got it, and they're really behind it. I've got an awesome team of women who have worked on it and really see it as a game changer in the way that we approach sexual improvement, and sexual empowerment. There's so many sex technique books out there, and not a lot of books that really look at the whole of sexuality and how we can really step into our personal power, maximize our sexual energy, and really have that sexual intelligence that changes our lives. And so the book is based on the 9 elements, and it's really about how, when we work on those things, that changes everything. It's not, as we've talked about in this call, it's not just about sex.
Right. That just spurred in me a thought that, what I often say to people about my not my hidden agenda, but my overall purpose for the work that I do is because I fundamentally want to change the way we talk about and heal from sexual abuse. I want to end the story out there that it's a life sentence, that you're never going to get better, that you just got to find cute ways to cope with it, right? And that's what really drives, everything that I do. And I got just really curious here, like, what is that for you? Like, what is the story that you want people to have about sexuality, or what is it that, what change are you really wanting to affect in this area, particularly for women?
Well, I think that if we were a world of sexually empowered women, first of all, women would be running the world, and
nice.
And secondly, it's just if we were living in a world where people were just sexually empowered, it's not even just women. We wouldn't need war. I really feel like it is that core to people's happiness and joy and how we approach life.
Wow.
Sexuality is about our life force. And when we are profoundly connected to that life force and in reverence and respect for that life force and getting to really experience it in a fulfilling way, and we have the pleasure and joy that brings, that changes everything. That is not minor.
Gosh.
And I think that sometimes people talk about sexuality like, oh, it's a luxury, or it's a luxury to work on it. Sexuality is not a luxury. It is a core part of who we are. And doing that work changes everything. My tagline on my website, if anyone has seen my TEDx talk, is the more whole we are as sexual beings, the more fulfilled we are as human beings. And that's my core message. And that sexuality changes throughout our lives, and that's what's awesome about it. It's very dynamic. It's not the things that are going on for you sexually or that you're desiring sexually or your experience of your sexuality now is not going to be the same in 5 years or in 10 years. And and I guarantee you it's different than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
For sure,
It changes. Yeah. And the more you actually focus on developing it, the more dramatic change you get to have, the more dramatic experiences, range of experiences you get to have. That's
wow, woman. That's intense.
I'm still learning. I'm more educated than most people about sexuality in the world, and I still learn all the time. There's always more. And that's awesome. I love that.
Well, oh my gosh. I mean, you just blew the top off it because, holy cow, I think you're absolutely right. And it's an extremely powerful thing when we really tune into, thank you so much, really. Our sexuality is not secondary. It's not a luxury. Gosh, if you guys don't get anything else from tonight, like write that down, put that on a poster, put it in front of your mirror, because it's such a part of our essence. It's such a part of who we are. And I also loved the beautiful reminder that it evolves and it changes. There is no such thing as, okay, now I'm good, and this is how I do it, and this is how it gets done, and all of that. Our fantasies can change. What we like, dislike changes. That as we grow as people and are ever evolving, of course, our sexuality is going to change and grow as well. So thank you for that. Really beautiful.
Absolutely.
Man, so folks, we've got about 10 minutes left here, and if nobody hops on, I'm going to let Amy Jo go because she's given us a good amount of her time tonight, but we're here, so take advantage of it. If you have a question, don't feel like you're going to be taking up too much space, or your question isn't important enough, or your question is silly. One of the things I talk to my clients a lot about is, let yourself be seen, let yourself be heard, and get the support and care that you need. So press *6, and then 1 if you want to chat with us here, or text 650-283-5215. So, yeah, we'll see if anyone wants to hop on here and get a last little question in before we wrap up tonight. But really great work that you're up to, and I know that you do events and that you travel around for that. Do you have anything coming up in person soon?
Gosh, what am I doing in person? A lot of my in-person work are my programs right now. So yeah, but if you join my list, it's a really engaged tribe. We have a really awesome tribe of people, and I think we talk about some really important and kind of different kinds of things. So, but yeah, I'll definitely keep you posted. And later this year, I'll be on tour with the book and all of that. So there'll be lots of opportunities for people to check something out.
Sounds good. Very, very good.
Thank you so much for having me on.
You're welcome. No, thank you. And so, very good. Very, very good. And as I mentioned, everyone, I'll be sending out a little follow-up email today that'll have a link to the recording of today's call and also a link to Amy Jo's website. So you can go there and download her free gift as well as get on her newsletter so you can stay posted about all the great stuff that she's doing. And thank you all for being here with us tonight. Really enjoyed sharing this time with you. As Amy Jo mentioned, just being here is a really great step. And so if you have any questions or concerns or thoughts that come up, please don't hesitate to give us a call or shoot us an email. You'll have our contact information as well in the follow-up email. And until next time, take really good care of you, and we'll be seeing you again soon. Good night, everyone.
Good night.